Hey folks, thanks for checking out the Phillies Talk podcast. I'm Corey Seidman, he's Ricky Bottalico. Our producer, as always, is Spencer McKercher, and we're about a week away from opening day as we sit down to record this. The Phillies leave Florida next Monday. The season begins on March 28th at home against the Braves. And Ricky, one of the big topics, the big topic for the Phillies during spring training, aside from the big picture of how far they can get, is the center field situation with Johan Rojas. He did not enter camp having been handed that role. The Phillies wanted to see offensive improvement. And to this point in camp, Rojas is still playing his elite level of defense. But you look at the offensive numbers, he's hitting in the mid-100s, a lot of strikeouts, not many walks. The Phillies have had him focused on many different things this offseason. But how do you handicap the situation with about a week left of Grapefruit League play?
The one thing I look at in this whole situation is, okay, here's what you have. You have a great center fielder. How many runs is he going to save defensively that could, kind of counteract his offensive abilities? I think they keep him. I think you should keep him out there in center field, let him play every day, see what happens. If you feel at some point in the first month that you may be stunting his growth, well, then you send him down to AAA, let him get some at-bats.
Yeah, I mean, the big, I guess the thing you're weighing is it enough of an upgrade to not have him break camp with the team? Is Christian Pache enough of an upgrade in center field? Or is Brandon Marsh in center with Whit Merrifield in left field 6 or 7 days a week? Is that an ideal pairing? I mean, the Phillies, it seemed when they signed Merrifield, had more of an idea to try to rest him so they could keep him fresh. If you look at Merrifield's September last season, he really went downhill. And, that could be a piece of getting older and playing all these different positions. But that's the thing you have to look at, is that Christian Pache also offers good defense, also is a lesser bat, but he is a more capable offensive performer as of this very moment, and the Phillies are in win now mode. And we're not, as we've talked about in recent weeks, they're not necessarily in the mode of trying to evaluate guys on the fly, give them on the job training, but there isn't another center fielder. There isn't another perfect situation here. So it seems like unless Rojas just shows that he's an absolute zero their final week in Florida and then early in the season, why not go with the defense? Why not go with the guy who had 15 defensive runs saved in just 57 games last season? We focus so much on the offense, but because the defense is harder to measure, but that also matters, from a run prevention standpoint.
I think you're absolutely right. I look at Christian Pache and say, okay, you're looking at a guy, is that pot of gold going to open? I mean, we all know he was a highly touted player when he was first drafted, but I mean, has he really gotten to that point where he could break out and be an everyday player and put up good numbers offensively as well as play good defense? We haven't seen that yet. I mean, we have seen signs that he could swing the bat a little bit. I don't think you're right. You don't really lose a ton out in center field, but with the Merrifield situation, I think you hit the nail on the head. Do you want him playing 100 games this season? The answer is no. I mean, when you look back, number one, you get exposed. The more you're in games, the more you get exposed, the more you get focused on by opposing pitchers. And number two, the failure last year is a little bit concerning late in the season. So that's another reason why I think I keep Rojas at this point. I just think you built the team to have certain players play in certain situations. And now if you're going to start the season kind of backwards, I don't think that helps anybody in the long run.
Yeah, Merrifield last season was hitting over 300 through mid-August, and then from August 16 through the end of the season hit just 167. He started 137 games last year, did Merrifield. I don't think the Phillies want him to start that many. You mentioned 100. I think that would probably be ideal, somewhere in between, 115 or so. But the Johan Rojas situation, it's still going to be the most important thing to watch here over this final week of Phillies camp. They're giving him as many plate appearances as possible. He leads the team this spring. He's been leading off a lot. They're trying to get him to work on a bunch of different things, moving his hands and using his lower half more and bunting. And, it's a lot for a young guy to try to be learning. But, the good news from Rojas' perspective is that the defense never suffers, even when he's so focused on all these other things.
No, he's really good defensively. I think the one thing you got to take out of Phillies camp is there's been really no drama. Right. I mean, besides Orion Kerkering with the flu or the illness on March 1st and the Bryce Harper back thing right now, besides that, I mean, it's been very drama free. And I can't remember one spring training that I played in or went to that there was no drama. And for me, that's just shows that this team is ready and capable of winning going into the regular season.
Well, the Orion Kirkring situation, he was a guy that many had as a lock for the bullpen, but the fact that he's missed all this time now with an illness, about 3 weeks, he's pitched sparingly in Grapefruit League play, and he's a young guy. Rob Thompson made a comment the other day. He's in his early 20s, 22 years old. You're not gonna push this thing too far. Just how much does that set you back when you go 3 weeks without pitching in spring training? I mean, I've seen him throw bullpen sessions here and there during that time, but obviously not the same as game action.
Now, I haven't seen him, so I'm not going to pretend like I've seen him after the illness, but obviously you get the flu, you get sick, you're going to lose weight. You're going to lose muscle mass. You're going to lose a lot. And the last thing you want to do is go into the regular season. Your arm might feel great, but you don't want to go into the season without facing a lot of hitters, especially as a young guy. You want to feel comfortable at the big league level again. And when you miss 3 weeks of spring training, that sets you back basically to 3 weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if they send him down to AAA. Just let him get innings. Don't worry about his numbers. Just let him get innings. And then when they feel that he's at 100%, then you can bring him back up. I mean, there's no loss there in a sense. Obviously, you lose a guy that you thought you would use 6th, 7th, 8th inning type guy at least. But, I mean, there's plenty of arms and weapons out in the bullpen that could get the job done. So I wouldn't even think twice about sending him down to start the season.
So the Phillies, it's another season where they're not going to enter the year naming a closer, it seems. There's going to be several different guys in the mix for that: Alvarado, Dominguez, Hoffman. Do you think that it's going to behoove them to go with that approach moving forward, or do you think that they would benefit from solidifying a closer? Like last year, Kimbrel became the closer, but he didn't enter the season as that. It wasn't for about, a month and a half until Jose Alvarado got hurt that Kimbrel went into that role. The Phillies want to put a closer into that, slotted role when they have somebody they feel deserves it, but they don't want to, pigeonhole themselves. That's been the reason. They want to be able to deploy an Alvarado at any point in the game. So I guess when you weigh being able to use Alvarado in the 7th inning versus having him as your everyday closer, what do you think of that?
Nowadays, let me put it this way. Nowadays, pitching has changed in the bullpen. As a matter of fact, go around the league, see how many teams have a solidified closer, and it's not like it used to be. Every single team used to have a solidified closer that would go in there, pitch the 8th or the 9th back then. But now it's a little different. Now it really comes down to, you might need a closer in the 6th inning. And that is a true statement now, because they really take that into consideration. I really feel like being a bullpenner now is all about stopping momentum. And once you stop momentum of the other team, you've kind of done the job, and you've kind of switched it back into your clubhouse. So I look at it in that sense that, okay, if you're not going to go into the closer, you got to have a guy, though, in every game, whether it be Soto, Alvarado, or Sir Anthony, that's ready to go for that 9th inning. You understand what I mean? You could have guys that are not necessarily closers that still can get the job done there. I mean, I'm sure Hoffman could get that job done too. But I guess when you use one of your top guys, one of your top 4, we'll call it, earlier on in the ball game, you better make sure you have enough room to the back end of the bullpen where somebody's ready to close.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the Phillies have quantity and quality of relievers, but there's no, clear answer. I think that I've mentioned this before, but if Gregory Soto can take a step forward this season, it would go a long way. It was a mixed bag last year where the numbers looked worse than he probably performed because of a handful of really bad outings. And if he can just avoid that, this is another guy who throws 99, 100 miles per hour. We think so much about Alvarado's velocity because he can do it with 2 different pitches. Soto has that in his tool bag too. If he can throw some more strikes and miss bats with the slider, he could be much better than he was a year ago. We all know how volatile relief performance can be. Ricky, earlier on, you mentioned the Bryce Harper back situation. He now hasn't played in 4 or 5 days. He has back tightness. The Phillies are saying it's obviously precautionary. They're just being careful with him. When I first heard it, I'm thinking, okay, the guy's been worked so hard this spring. You go over to the ballpark in the morning in Clearwater, he's already like at a full sweat working out at first base on the back field by like 8 a.m. So he's working out early in the morning at first base. He's taking rips in the cage. He's playing in games. So it adds up. you can see why the Phillies are stepping back from him for a little bit. But I'll mention that, this isn't the first time that Bryce Harper's dealt with a back injury as a Philly. They've popped up here and there. So it's just something to keep an eye on. He's obviously going to be squatting more. He's going to be in the, the defensive stance on every pitch more at first base, I would think. So that could, factor into it as well. But it's a long season. You want to keep that guy as healthy as possible this time of year.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people look at first base as, what does he got to do? He just catches the ball over there. It's not like that. You're absolutely right. You got to be in ready position every single play. You're no different than a second baseman or shortstop. You got to move around. You're going to have to go into the hole. You're going to have to lay out for baseballs at times. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movement over at first base. There's a lot to learn, and that's why he's been doing all this extra work, because he wants to be really good at it. He just doesn't want to be a statue over at first base. We've had enough of those in the last 10 years over at first. But I look at it this way. The one thing that has been very true, and you could go back on this and look, when Bryce Harper has had an injury, the Phillies and Bryce Harper have been extremely honest about it. They have come right out and said what is wrong with him, how long he's going to be out, what they think it is, if they think it's major, if they don't think it's major. So I'm kind of leaning towards listening to what Bryce has had to say. And I believe he said by this Friday, he's going to get in a game, whether it be down at the Carpenter Complex or in the big league game. So I believe what Bryce Harper says, and I believe what the Phillies are doing right now. You give him a little extra time off, it's not going to hurt you right now. He's still going to get 20 more at-bats, right? Most likely before he gets to opening day. So, I mean, this is Bryce Harper we're talking about. This is not some borderline player we're talking about. If he needs the rest early on in spring training, you give him the rest.
Yeah, plus if he comes back by Friday and is able to participate in a couple games by the end of camp, you'd figure he'd be seeing pitchers that are going to break camp with those teams. He's going to be seeing actual velocity and good stuff. So, it would enable him to see the live pitching. And
it wouldn't surprise me that Friday he goes down to Carpenter Complex and gets 20 at-bats. Mm-hmm. Because you know how they are down there. They just lead them off in a game, lead them off every inning, and all of a sudden those at-bats are really kind of piling up for him. So, sometimes they might do that. I mean, I don't know how they may just see how his back reacts at bat to at bat.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what they did with Brandon Marsh. They got him 40 at bats in those games to try to better prepare him for his return. And Marsh has looked pretty good so far since coming back, been running around.
Surprisingly quick return.
Right. And arthroscopic knee procedure on March 9th or on February 9th, and he's back in the lineup. The Phillies put that initial timetable of 4 to 6 weeks, and he made it back in 4 to 6 weeks. And such a huge part of the Phillies team, Brandon Marsh, because of the ability to play center field, the left-handed bat. He's a guy who took a step forward last season offensively with that on-base percentage in the upper 300s, approaching 400. And I remember talking to Marsh at one point last season about like the improved plate selection, and he said, what it comes down to is you need to hit to walk. And I've been hitting, and pitchers are respecting me a little more, and he's been able to take his walks more. So you see some like offensive growth from that guy. I wonder what Marsh and Bryson Stott will be able to do in 2024, because they took things up a level in 2023. If they can take things up one more level, now you're nearing that, really good everyday player status.
Now you're nearing that. How many guys are we going to be able to sign in a few years? I mean, when you look at it, I look at Brandon Marsh as he was one of those guys where when they saw him on the Angels, they knew they could fix him. There's not a lot of people around the league that you could say that about. I know the Phillies have done it with Alvarado. They've tried to do it with Soto, and that's still a work in progress. It's not as simple as you would think. I mean, you look at a guy's swing, and then he comes over to the Phillies, and he's got to completely change everything. That takes a long time to get into that groove and to be comfortable with it. He's gotten to a point now where he could be, a very legitimate player at the big league level. And when you look at Brandon Marsh, he's got a little pop. He's a gap-to-gap type guy. He'll take his walks. He does everything the Phillies would want him to do. So I think he's going to get better. I really do. I think he's still got an upside on him. And then you talk about Bryson Stott. I think he's just scratching where he could get to. I think this guy's got a beautiful swing, beautiful major league swing. His second bit, you know what bothers me? He didn't get a lot of credit for as well as he played defense last year. And I'm talking nationally. I think we give him a lot of credit because we see him day in, day out. But I think nationally, I don't think he got as much credit as he deserved. And even still, you look at like the top whatever second baseman, he's not in it. And I think he deserves to be. I think this year is going to be one of those shining years for him. I think he's going to be that guy that stands out on this team that's going to take that next step.
At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone, including a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Speaking of taking the next step, I believe we have Spencer McKercher in the house. There he is.
What's going on, guys? How we doing?
Good.
Hey, speaking of, so we did a little mailbag yesterday, asked some Twitter fans to send some questions in, kind of going off the Stott and the Marsh train. James Jackson, one of my good friends, actually, tweeted, if you were to name a breakout star for this year, not named Harper, Turner, Casti, or Schwarber, who would that be? Corey, I know you and I kind of had the conversation, and Ricky even too, down in the live Q&A, but give me your opinion now. Who's going to be the breakout star for the Phillies this season?
So I've said it a couple times now, so it might be kind of a boring answer, but I think Christopher Sanchez, just based on what we saw last summer in the second half, and if he can add a couple new wrinkles to his repertoire with the additional velocity that he showed early in camp and a cutter that might be a better pitch against right-handed pitching. This is a guy who last year Sanchez had statistically the best changeup in all of baseball with a 148 opponent's batting average. So we know that he has that elite pitch. If he can add separation, velocity between the fastball and the changeup, if he can add that cutter, this is a guy who might become the Phillies' number 3 starter. Like, he's a number 5 starter only in name. And I'm not saying that there's no chance that Christopher Sanchez takes a step back this season, but I just feel like what we saw in the second half last year was real, and he's added some elements to build on it. What do you think, Rick?
Interesting you say that. I've talked about my regular players who I think are going to be one. I'm going to go with Ranger. I know Ranger's good, but I have a feeling this is going to be one of those years where Ranger takes that next step. Ranger's going to go out. He's going to give you innings this year. We all know that he wants to go out there for more than 5 innings. I think he's going to be the guy that Rob Thompson gives a little bit of a leash to this year. I think they're going to try to stretch him that extra inning in certain games where he's throwing the ball well. I think he's the type of guy that just doesn't give a bleep about what's going on around him, and he's going to go out there and stick it to people this year. He's going to be a stud on this team. He's going to be 1C at the end of the season. We're going to talk about him as a 1C on this team.
Well,
A and B and Wheeler and Nola, he's going to be C.
He's been here, Ranger Suarez, for so long that you forget he's never made 30 starts. His career high is 155 innings. So he's been very good in a variety of roles for the Phillies. The one thing we haven't seen from him is that full season's worth of starts where he averages like 5.5 to 6 innings per start. And he's better set up for that, Ranger Suarez, because as we talked about earlier in the month, he finally had a normal spring training for the Phillies. There were no
and he's healthy.
There were no injuries. There were no World Baseball Classic. He's finally been able to make a full slate of starts in camp, and you would think that enables him to kind of take off when the season begins.
Absolutely. He's ready to go, man. He threw a gem against Detroit in his last start down in the spring. He's ready. Ranger's ready.
What else do they want to know, Spence? What else?
I'm pretty sure I think he still has a 0.0 ERA.
Yeah, he hasn't given up a run yet.
It's been impeccable. I love that. I love the confidence of Ranger and Christopher Sanchez. I think if those two can kind of settle in that back end of the rotation, we'll be okay. Corey, go ahead.
Are you saying that Suarez might have a 0 ERA this year? You think he can keep that going?
That'd be crazy.
Under 0?
Oral Hershiser.
I'm gonna go over.
Yeah.
But I'll keep it under 2.3, 2.4.
Oh, that's bold.
I was thinking under 3 would be great.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
What else you got?
All right, so yeah, this is from Cake Marsh, actually on Twitter. And they asked, as the Braves only improved this offseason, what's the one thing the 2024 Phillies need to do differently to close that 14-game gap from 2023?
I think it's simple. Get off to a good start. I mean, I don't think there's any other reason. I mean, you get off to a good start, especially considering you're playing the Braves right off the bat. You get off a good start and your pitching is ready to go, which it looks it this year. I think everybody looks ready to go. Corey just even said about Ranger Suarez. I mean, he's had his issues at the beginning of the seasons. Zach Wheeler has had issues at the beginning of the season, but I think it's a little different this year. I think these guys are focused. I think they have that in their mindset that, you know what, let's not let the Braves run away from us early on in the season. Let's get off to a good start. You think about it. I mean, they've gotten off to 2 bad starts in the last 2 years, and then they play 600 baseball. So I think this team is capable of playing that right off the bat. They get off to a good start, and, you know, they have that focus early on in the season. And I think another guy who's got to kind of kick it up a little bit at the beginning of the season to get off to a good start is Kyle Schwarber.
You know, you don't play your teams in the division as much as you used to. It's no more 18, 19 games. It's only the 4 series now. So there isn't as much time to make up ground on a team that you're chasing, that you're that far behind. The Phillies open up with the Braves. They see them again July 5 through 7. They see them in August, twice in the span of a week. So there's really only going to be certain condensed opportunities to make a dent in the division. And as you said, Ricky, the first 3 games of the season are one of them. It's the first 3 games, but you can't overlook what that might mean later on down the road. But what I would just say is, I do think this is going to be the best regular season version of this Phillies group, right? They've added more depth. It's probably the most talented of these last few teams. And I do think that the Phillies can win 98, 99 games, something like that, because the landscape of the National League is not that strong. However, having said that, I still think the Braves are going to win the division by 6, 7 games. You know, I still think the Braves are going to win 105, 106. That lineup is ridiculous. They've won with and without Acuna, with and without Freddie Freeman. The one thing I could say that might trip them up, the Braves, is what happens if Chris Sale gets hurt? What happens if Charlie Morton finally shows signs of aging? Because they are led by Spencer Strider in the rotation and Max Fried, and their big starting pitching addition this offseason was Sale, who when he's right and when he's going well is as unhittable as anybody. I mean, he impressed against the Phillies in Northport earlier this month, but obviously with Sale, there are significant injury risks, and that just bears watching with the Braves.
The one I think the Phillies are going to win the division. I think they win 100 games this year and win the division. I really do. I think this is the year. What they do in the playoffs, that's for another day. But in all honesty, I look at the Braves, and you just brought up their starting rotation. That has hurt them late in the season now 2 years in a row. And I will say this much, and this goes for both of these teams. They are primed to make moves at the trade deadline in July. And I think if either one of these teams is missing a piece or 2 pieces, don't expect it to be missing on August 1st.
Spence, if the Phillies win the division, that means that people are going to be having the debate about whether it's good or not to have to rest for all that, you know, that period of time before the NLDS, like the Braves did. So I don't know if that would be a good thing or not.
The best part is that Brian Snicker, they had that game. It was like an inter-squad game that they brought fans to, and they're like, oh, we just, had to warm up, and then it still obviously didn't work for them. And kind of piggybacking off that here, we get Strider Wheeler right for opening day. They just announced that Spencer Strider will now go for us. Wheeler, so far, he's made 13 regular season starts against the Braves as a Philly, 6-2 with a 2.32 ERA. Strider's 8-0 against us in the regular season. Obviously, we know in the postseason he's 0-3. I mean, this game could be over in 2 hours, maybe.
Oh,
less.
there it is, 5-hour game.
If both, we're already jinxing it. 1, 2. I'm excited for opening day just because we get to see Strider back in the bank. I think the fans will be just crazy and attacking him like they did in the postseason. What are we looking forward to in that game come, 8 days away from now?
I mean, those might be the 1-2 finishers in Cy Young voting this season. Really, they might be the 2 best right-handed pitchers in the entire National League. And it's really weird it's interesting with Strider. Like, he dominates most teams, right? He dominates most teams, including the Phillies, but he also has stumbles. I remember last year he gave up 3 homers in a game at Comerica Park in Detroit, which is one of the most pitcher-friendly parks in all of baseball against a bad team. So he's susceptible at times. But when he has that fastball and breaking ball working, it's so hard to touch.
And now the changeup too.
Good
He
luck.
added that. How about that? Both of these pitchers have added a pitch that are starting. One of them had Wheeler adds a split, and then Strider adds that changeup. And apparently, this changeup is pretty nasty. So,
hey, but that splitters look great so far in spring too.
It has looked pretty good. I'm curious as to see how much he actually uses it, like in his opening game. But I think it really, like, that game could come down to who's sharper on that given day. What's the weather going to be like? Obviously, we're 8 days away. But it's supposed to rain and be drizzling again at Citizens Bank Park on an opening day. I don't even know who that actually favors, to be honest with you. And it could come down to a battle of the bullpens late in the ball game. So, I mean, in my opinion, this could be a great opening day. It could be a really good opening day for pitchers too. So
I will say 2 years ago, Zach Wheeler's first start of the season against the Braves at home, 7 innings, 1 hit, 7 scoreless innings, 1 hit, and 10 strikeouts. So we've seen that Zach Wheeler can come out of the gates ready to go. You see a lot of times that early in the season, starting pitchers only go 5 innings the first time through the rotation. But, both of these guys are workhorses. So if they're firing on all cylinders, that could be a really fun pitcher's duel on opening day.
Hey, by the way, right now the weather app says 60 and partially cloudy for next.
Oh, so it changed. See,
I would take it.
60 and partially cloudy.
I'll take 60 on opening day
for the first day for the first game.
And what they have 2 series and then they go away. But do they even go far?
They have Nationals and Cardinals for that first.
They don't go very far in the trip. So
that National series, that's going to be a big test. That's going to be a big April test in DC.
You think so?
If they go down there and poop the bed, oh boy.
Well, do you think? Okay, here's the question, because I've seen this kind of get thrown out there too on the old Twitterverse, I guess the Xverse, not whatever you want to call it. Who's going to finish last in this division? Is it going to be the Nationals? I mean, I've seen some guys pick the Nationals finish 4th, the Marlins to finish 5th. Some guys have the Mets finishing 5th. Who's going to finish last? Is it going to be the Nats again?
I'm going to say the Nats, because the Marlins still have that young pitching. They still have Luzardo. They still have some guys. So, I mean, I just think the low-scoring games that they play kind of helps them out in the long run. I think the Nationals are going to be the grass with a lawnmower coming over it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I mean, the one thing I will say, though, is that the Marlins pitching staff is not going to be what it was last year. Sandy Alcantara was out for most of the season, if not all season. Yuri Perez, it seems like he's still on somewhat of an innings cap. Doesn't look like he's going to break camp in the rotation. So Luzardo, obviously, very good, and they're going to try to start A.J. Puck. The Marlins will, a left-handed dominant rotation. But I do expect the Marlins to take a step back, but that Nationals team might be the worst in all of baseball, honestly. There's some really bad teams.
Really? Name 5 players on the Oakland A's.
Geloff. Zach Geloff. I picked him up in fantasy late last year. He helped me out.
Trust me, it's hard to name them.
Who else?
Yeah, there you go.
Alex Wood.
Grab one more. We get one more.
Started.
Who's the catcher? I don't know. I'll get back to you with the A's open.
Go ahead, check your Google machine.
Google machine.
Anything else, Spence? Anything else the fans are clamoring to know?
That's the good stuff.
The mailman.
I mean, somebody asked the mailman if the Phillies could make one late spring addition to the team before the season starts, what position would it be? I don't think they necessarily need it. Right now, I think they're having the problem that there's too many positions or guys that, especially in the outfield there. I mean, we talked about the center field battle early. I think here in the next few days is going to get real interesting.
You can always add pitching, but they don't even really, they're probably not even looking into that right now.
Right, yeah, and what they sent Colby Allard down, Rodolfo Castro down. They'll start the season in AAA. So,
it was Allard, Max Castillo were sent down, so that kind of reduces the number of players in line for that long relief spot in the bullpen. It really looks like Spencer Turnbull has the inside track. The Phillies, there was a thought that maybe they would send Turnbull to AAA to have him stretched out, ready to go every 5 days, but there might be a way to keep him stretched out at the major league level. I actually asked him about that earlier this month. Like, how do you stay starter level stamina if you're not pitching every 5 days in that role? And he said, I don't know. I'm probably not the right guy to ask. I've never done it before. I got to figure that out. So it'll be a learning process.
It's almost impossible because you have to be ready for certain nights. Unless you have like Wheeler Nola going the next 2 days, maybe he could throw some sim games. But That's hard. That's a hard thing to ask of a guy being at the big league level, ready to go 5 innings, when he's called upon. It's not going to be that easy.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything you can really go out and get that's going to be a substantial improvement over what you have right now. Like, yeah, Jordan Montgomery's still out there. I don't think they're going to do that unless it falls in their lap. With some of these other guys, like Spence mentioned, there's too many guys. Jake Cave, Christian Pache. The Phillies might lose one of these guys if they don't have them on the opening day roster. So that's a consideration right now. There would have to be a meaningful upgrade, I would think, for them to add another player to the mix. It's more likely that they would do what they did the other day when they signed Jordan Luplow to a minor league contract to add another person to that outfield mix after he got out of his deal with the Braves.
Corey, what are your thoughts? And we can wrap after this. What are your thoughts? I know we talked about it a lot. Ricky, you'll get yours too. Just on the David Dahl situation, obviously, probably going to be the one man out. But will we see him in AAA? Will we see him make a jump to the big leagues? Obviously, if there's an injury to one of these guys, I mean, he's had a decent spring so far. Where do we see David Dahl? Come July.
Yeah, I think it looks like he's going to open at AAA. There were some questions about whether he had like an opt-out in his deal if he wasn't going to make the team, but it doesn't appear that he does. And he spent AAA he spent the last 2 years at AAA with the Dodgers and I believe the Padres and the Brewers, and the Nationals. So, I mean, he's played at AAA. It's not like David Dahl's unwilling to go to AAA and play some there. When I spoke to him earlier this month, he just talked like a guy who thought he was going to be around this organization and was looking forward to being able to help, whether it's on opening day or midway through the season. I've been mentioning this, but the Phillies used 56 players a year ago and 44 the year before. So we place all this importance on the opening day roster, but there's so many guys who come up and help throughout a year, even if they're not here on March 28th.
And I think what he might do is just to watch who makes the team, who doesn't make the team. I mean, because guys in his position sometimes will ask for a release because obviously there's teams out there that could use a player like that. I mean, I'd be a little surprised if he goes down to AAA and says, how about a month opt out? If I don't come up in a month, then I could opt out. I mean, you could always ask the team for that. I don't know what the Phillies would do with that, though.
Yeah, so, Ricky, you mentioned that it's been mostly drama-free for the Phillies in camp. Hopefully it doesn't lead to some complacency. I don't think it will because these guys are as hungry as can be. The thing is that we've just reached the point now with this Phillies team where the expectations are so high. It reminds me of going into 2011 where the Phillies, when they win games this year, everybody can say, okay, they were expected to win that game. When they lose games, people are going to be upset that they lost. How could they lose a series to this Pittsburgh Pirates team that's so much worse than them? So they've almost reached this point now where any success in the regular season is almost totally meaningless, right? It doesn't matter what it is.
It is meaningless. But, I mean, making the playoffs, but how about making the playoffs in a good spot this year? I mean, maybe they set their goals that high. I think that would be a good thing. I mean, you have to go in there and think, okay, we're better than the Braves. That's how the Phillies as a team have to be thinking. And it was funny. I was talking to Rob Thompson last week, and the one thing he said to me is that these guys are just in there having fun, and they got each other's backs. He goes, he even said something to the fact that he hasn't been around teams that are like that, and he knew that I hadn't. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. When you feel comfortable playing with 25 other guys, you're just going to play better on the field. It's that simple.
And the Phillies, I can say with confidence that they feel like they are better than the Braves. I mean, I know the Braves have put these, regular seasons together, but the Phillies have ended their years twice in a row. And I don't think there's any lack of confidence in that clubhouse that the Phillies can stand toe-to-toe with that Atlanta Braves team as formidable as it is. And we'll see it all unfold here in about a week when opening day hits on March 28th.
Let's go.
I'm Corey Seidman. He's Ricky Bottalico. Our producer is Spencer McKercher. Thanks a lot for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. We'll catch you soon.